All right, so welcome to Voices Without Borders, where every immigration story is worth celebrating. I'm changing the way America does immigration by challenging misconceptions, advocating for fair immigration policies, and amplifying the voices of those impacted through the art of storytelling. I'm Veronica Cardenas, an immigration lawyer, a former attorney with the Department of Homeland Security, and most importantly, the mentor I wish my parents had when they came to this country 30 years ago. I'm on a mission to redefine what immigrant means and create an America where we can be proud of our immigrant beginnings and find belonging. Today, we'll be speaking with Dr. Felipe Lopez Sustaita. He's a family man, a professor, a speaker, and author of You Can't Run from Your Destiny, Lessons from a Migrant Farm Worker. Welcome, Dr. Felipe Lopez, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, no, it's a privilege, Veronica, especially with everything that you do to help our community. How can you not, jump in and help, right? When you see somebody doing phenomenal work like you are. So it's a privilege for me to be here with you this morning and just, try to share whatever knowledge I have.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. So I did buy your book and I read it, and I read it really fast. So I really loved the book. And I want to first start, because I know you share a lot of your story in the book, but since I have you here, you can talk more about it. So I want to start with your family's journey to the United States. So can you tell us, how old were you? I know you said you were pretty young, and what you remember from that beginning.
Yeah, I was a little boy, and I always start by telling people, that immigrants come in so many ways, right? There's so many stories, and that's the beauty that you're creating a platform for people like me and many others to tell their story. But for me, it started with my dad, right? The Bracero program, when there was like World War II happening, and there wasn't enough males here to work the land. So they brought like my dad here when he was a young man, maybe 18. And he worked the fields, right? And did it for so many years. And eventually, I think a law passed that he was able to get his green card. And I don't know if it was Nixon or Reagan that signed it.
Do you remember when the Bracero program was initiated? Because I know that's a really old program.
Yeah, I think it was like in the 60s,
Okay.
60s, 70s. And
Okay.
so I would be not doing the justice if I don't share that, right? Because people talk about luck. Oh, I'm so lucky that I have papers. I'm so lucky. But somebody paid the price, right? And that was my father who paid the ultimate price. And my mother too, because we often leave the women out, right? My mom was raising all these children, right, on her own, while my father had to go into America and multiple cities and really cultivate the land and work. So I was a little boy. I'm the youngest of 8, right? So when we came into this country, my dad was already a resident, right? So I remember very little of anything. I just remember the poverty, right? And working in the field since I was a little boy and moving from city to city. But those are the things that I remember. And then knowing that there was something, right? Because I don't know if it was permits or what, but because of my dad being a resident, we had a little bit better starting than others that don't have anything. But that's kind of the starting journey for us. I didn't get my papers, my residency card, until I was like 6 or 7, maybe 8. Because we don't have really good paper trails or anything like that. It's just me and my mom talking like, oh yeah, you got it when you were like 6, 7, whatever. So, but that was kind of our journey.
And that's what I was going to ask you. So like for me, for example, a lot of the story that I know is because I've asked my parents and they've given me bits and pieces. It wasn't something that like we really spoke about. And I think there was a lot of trauma with, you know, just the story, like just anybody's story in particular. Like a lot of people don't want to talk about it. So do you know what you know because of what you witnessed, what you experienced, or was this something that your family had talked to you about?
Yeah, I mean, I noticed the discrimination. I'm a social worker. I have an MSW, and it's funny because even as a 6, 7-year-old, you're advocating, right? And you see the mistreatment of people, um, the modern day slavery, right? Of people being mistreated and just overworked. And I noticed that. I saw the hesitancy of people being scared, right? When you work in a farm, and knowing that like immigration or something can come, like there's that trauma, right? That fear. And so at a very young age, I had the knowledge and that something wasn't right, right? That people were fearful, and you hear people talking. And I used to hang out with like 60-year-olds and 50. So even as a 5, 6-year-old, I was obtaining knowledge from the elders, right? And I would sit with my father and the elders, and so I realized it and noticed it really early on, that something wasn't right. And you can see it by the housing that we lived in. You could see it from the hourly payments, $5.15 an hour, breaking your back all day, all these little things. And the cheap labor of always, it's like a business, right? Immigrant humans are, we're so disposable, yet we're so important to this country, but we're not seen like that. So, yeah.
And I want to circle back because you raised a few good points. I'm going to work my way backwards, but I want to start with what you said about luck. Like people see things as, oh, he's lucky. Or that was just bad luck there. And I think that concept is very dominant in our communities. And with the Bracero program, I learned about this in law school, and it seemed like it was so far away. I didn't think I would be talking to somebody who actually made that, that journey. And my understanding was that these programs were created, but people were allowed to come in and work, and then they had to return. Like they weren't given any status. So it depended on labor, right? We need labor. There is no one available. So who do we call on? People from our neighboring countries like Mexico. And then, oh, wait, now there's, a recession or the depression. So we don't need these people anymore. So, we deport them. And I feel like that, push and pull happened for many years, and it's probably still happening now. And, the people, and we'll talk about like the strength that, your family has endured, because you talked about that in your book. But I feel like the concept of luck, if you really look at it closely, it's just trying to point you into stories that started way before, you, and way before I was even born. So I do like that. I like that explanation for luck. And then with the immigrant, I know that you wrote this in your book, like there was a line where we're invisible but indispensable. And I just wanted to ask you to elaborate a little bit more on that, and like how you think, America's values play into that.
Yeah, I love this song. It's immigrant ghostwriters, right? This idea that we plant the fruit, that we cultivate it, and yet we can't even eat it, right? Like somebody else eats it. And we when you look in America right now, I'm in Michigan, but if you look in Florida or you look in New Jersey, like we're there, we're in dairy farms, we're everywhere, but yet because of who we are as a community, people see us as devaluating property, right? So they put us where you can't see us, right? In the back of the trees and in outhouses. And this is 2023, right? But that's what I mean by they can just get rid of us, call call INS or whatever, get rid of us, and then bring the next group, right? And these are jobs, right? Now we're looking at H-2A workers. I don't know if in where you're at in New Jersey they have H-2A, but here in Michigan now it's Haiti, it's Mexico. We bring these men. A lot of times it's mostly males. Hire them for 6-7 months, send them back when we need them. It's like a commodity. And but the folks that are undocumented have it probably even the worst, because now you have children, right? It's like if my children are U.S. citizens and they're now consuming the trauma. They're not going for services. They're paying the price, right? And people don't think about those things. And that's why I think you and I do what we do, right? Because we see opportunities for these young people. I mean, both of us, I'm an immigrant, your parents are immigrant. If we don't do it, nobody's going to come save us, right? Like we can't expect somebody to invest in our dream or somebody to come and just pick us up out of the trenches. Like we have to do it. And so both of us have an obligation to plant a seed in young people so that we build an army, a team, because we can't do it alone, right? Like it's really difficult. Right. I mean, I'm sure you were in law school and you looked around and you saw nobody that looked like you. And then you go and you work in the White House and you see nobody that looks like you making these decisions. Like that is a thing that drives me crazy. And that's why I do what I do, because we are the ones that have the problem, but we also have the solution, right? And often people try to shove the solution in our throat, and it's like you don't even know what we're going through, right? You're at the table, but not really understand. And so that's why it's so critical for anybody listening, right? That it is hard, and it's not. I mean, yes, a little bit of luck, right? We meet the right people and everything, but it's a lot of hard work, like a lot of scars, a lot of pain, a lot of things that you have to go through to get to this level. It's not that easy.
Yeah, and those are all excellent points, and it makes me think about the journey of self-discovery, because one of the things that I feel strongly about, and the reasons why we need to share immigration stories, like from the beginning, is because if we don't, the absence of that creates prisons in our own minds. Like we don't even understand why we act a certain way, but it definitely is because of things that we witnessed. And I was reading a study, and it's, I don't know if you ever heard of constellation therapy, but it's where like family traumas impact you, whether you know about the trauma or not. And they were doing studies about people whose family members were in the Holocaust, and or pregnant women when they were around in 9/11. And what they found was, a woman has her eggs at the time that she's conceived in her mother's belly. And so like my mom had all her eggs when she was in my grandmother. So the trauma that my grandmother suffered with like anxiety, depression, that actually affects the fetus. And it passes down. So if you have a low cortisone, you're subject to more anxiety, more stressful. It like brings on this like fight or flight reaction. And when I was listening to that, and I feel like, I don't know if this like sits well with you, but I am fight or flight. Like I'm always, and this has all been a healing journey, but I've learned about myself, like I am anxious. And I am like, all right, are we coming or are we going? Like, what's going on? And I feel like, when I now know about my mother's story, she came in through the border in the 80s from Colombia. She was arrested and detained. And she hasn't really been, like, we haven't really sat down to talk about how she felt, but I can only imagine. She was like 20. My brothers were still in Colombia. Like that anxiety, that depression, that must have come from that. So I feel like the whole journey of self-discovery is very important in our community. And when you look at ICE, for example, most of the employees, most of the people doing the work at the border, doing the work of the enforcement part, the arresting, the deporting, they're mostly Latinos. And I know a lot of people call for like abolishing ICE. And I feel like these topics are so important because that journey of self-discovery is what is, I think, the only way that we can grow from having like a more humane outlook on how we treat people coming to our country.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, and that's the beauty of it, right? Like your family's from Colombia, right? I'm Mexican, and but yet when people look at us, they think, oh, they're the same, right? Like they have the same experience, same journey.
Yes.
And if you're lucky, again, using the word lucky enough to be at a table where you're the only one, they make an assumption that you're fine, right? You're good because you did what you had to. But the reality is that but yeah, that trauma really exists. And I want to mention something because I'd be neglecting everything if I didn't say this. Like my healing has come through my spiritual, my religion, my belief in God, that he brought me from the back of the line all the way to the front in like literally no time. And so everything that I do is like I know who I work for. I know why I'm here, and everything that exists and everything that I have is not mine, is just going through me. And so I do want to acknowledge that because that's not often accepted anywhere. And so here I'm speaking, freely, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for God and for, my parents putting that in me. Because there's been times where I felt like, man, can I do it? Can I get through this storm? And then the storms kept getting bigger as you move up. And so, again, I wouldn't be authentic if I don't say that. And I said it in the book a lot. I must have mentioned it so many times, but I again, that's important to me, right? And it's something that because of the space that we live in, a lot of people aren't comfortable with that. But I just want to make sure I say that's my healing.
And I think that's a very important point. And can you talk to us a little bit about how it was growing up? You said you moved around several times a year from farm to farm, and you were very young. So can you, tell us about how it was for you living in that environment?
Yeah, and there's so many issues, right? Like, so when I talk about my childhood, I don't think about all these things, but I mean, a child working, right? Like child labor laws, all these things that were probably violated, housing violations, right? But yeah, I mean, in a small room, I mean, we moved to camps. I don't know if folks listening know what a migrant camp is. If you don't, please go out and look at them. Please get an opportunity to go out and talk to these workers. Like I take my kids, right? I take my kids to the strawberries, to blueberries, to cherries, apples, everywhere, so that they get an experience of, when you go to the store and you see these beautiful fruits and vegetables, like somebody picked them, right? Like somebody's out there, it's going through our hands so that before they get to the market. But yeah, it was literally that. I mean, nothing too exciting. It was just moving, right? We were chasing.
But you were how old?
Since I can remember, like it's like a blur from like, since anything I can remember is the fields, right? So, and there's no childcare. You jump in and you start picking with a little bucket or whatever. You see 3-4-year-olds going to a child time or childcare. Like, no, we didn't have that. You go to the fields, right? And then you start working,
So you were just like walking, like waddling and alongside your parents on the farm.
Yeah, 10 hours, out in the back, drinking water. But, the crazy part is that still exists. And guess what? My people, a lot of people don't have a problem with it. Why? Because we don't know any better. Like, I didn't know any better. We're just a little kid, hanging out. but I was always a big kid. I always tell people I was 6 foot by 12 years old. And so I was working with grown men, right? And when I turned 12 is what the most vivid, because, and in the book, I talk about going from being a rookie to a pro. And that between 11 and 12, I was already by society seen as a grown man. And that's what it was like. It was like, it beat the soul out of you, right? Everything that you had, any hopes, like you didn't think about any of that. Like you were there trying to make it through 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Maybe I'll make it to midnight, 1 o'clock, and then you just restart next day.
And you were only 12 at that. You were only
Yeah.
12 with those hours. That's
Yeah,
like
at 16, 18.
that's wow.
Yeah.
That's
And even before that, like, I was working in the peppers, like going and I don't know. I mean, that's why anytime I take a L in whatever work I do, I just have to close my eyes and think of like, and I'm not a quitter, but man, that work would make me want to quit, right? Like there was times where I was like, I don't know, I just can't do it. Like I don't want to do it, but I didn't have a choice, right? And but those things, like I think when you want to change society or the world, you have to have that in you. You have to have that fighting dog in you to say, man, that's why, because there's still kids out there. I'm no different, and I'm nothing special. Like there is still people out there right now as we talk,
And that's like, for me, from the little that I know about like migrant farm workers, they are exempt from so many labor laws. Like I think, and I don't know, you might know this more than I, but I think like the legal age to work on a farm is something like 12. It's like ridiculously low when you think about. And then, so you like, did they actually pay you a salary for your work, or did they just give it to your dad? Like
they would pay
that?
my dad. Yeah, they would pay. And that's another thing too, as you get older, like you talk about piece rate, and you talk about equity and all that, like that didn't exist. Like if the work wasn't good, because we are at the mercy of the weather, right? If it's raining, if it's flooding, we get paid or not get paid. But as I realized as an adult, was that when the work wasn't good, they should have been paying us per hour, but we were getting piece rate. So, it's all those things. No overtime, right? We're exempt from overtime, even today and in this time and age. You talk about minimum wage and small farms, like it's still in the laws, right? And I had the privilege to move up the ranks. That's why I say, I feel sometimes like David versus Goliath, like when you go from a shepherd boy to now advising governors, like that's how I felt, right? Going and talking about these issues and bringing them up forth. But it's it's challenging. I mean, and it's not enough to be at the table, as you know.
Yeah, and I didn't know much about this until, admittedly we spoke, because then I started to do my research and like the living conditions. So you're like, do you have to pay for that, or is that something that they like just gave you? And then the other thing is, like, can you describe how you were living during that time? Because I know it's not like a motel.
No. There was outhouses, right? And as a little kid, you're like, damn, the snake might pull up. All these things, but I didn't know any better, right? So what could I compare it to? Like, everybody around you were migrant workers. Everybody around you didn't have much, right? And when you're traveling in a family of 10, right, in one car or two cars, you don't have much belongings. Like, I think that trauma, to me, I think it's traumatic because you've never had anything, right? You have maybe a pair of shoes, you have, hand-me-downs from my sister, like going to school with the like pink shorts with pink wasn't cool back then, or her shoes. but those are the kind of stories that that you try to tuck away, right? Like, oh, I don't even want to think about that. Like, dang, that was rough. Um, but those are important stories that I tell my children, or when I get an opportunity to speak to kids, I'm like, look, that's, you have it so good. Don't complain, right? Like, your job is to come to school and do, do the best that you can. And yeah, but it's it's tough, in migrant camps. Um, if the owner didn't charge you rent, you're it's almost like slavery, right? You can't go to other camps, right? Well, I'm paying you to be here. Like, you kind of belong here. Don't go out and look for other jobs at 6 p.m. after you get out. But if you were paying, then maybe, if the neighbor needed some help, then you go work at night and make a little bit more money. But it's still happening, right? As I'm speaking about, and that's what bothers me. And so I have some plans to challenge the system, right? And I'm thinking of ways that what I can do. But yeah, I mean, we're not like Google, right? Where you get shares of the farm when you're working for them. You just get paid minimum wage, and then when you're no good for us, and you're gone.
Right. And I don't know if you're okay to talk about this, but you had told me a little bit, and you might have mentioned the book about like the toll it takes on a person's body, and about your father. If you want to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's I mean, just imagine, right? Your little boy. Like I said, I slept in all these places in the floor. I didn't know any better until I came to college at Michigan State, and had a bed, and didn't even know how to act, because like that was weird to me, right? And so you imagine with a roommate, who's very wealthy, and then you're just like, dang, I get the top bunk. What? What if I roll over? All that dumb stuff. But yeah, I mean, it takes a toll on you. If you can imagine my dad and mom thinking like how bad they felt as a parent, to be like, damn, my kid is in the floor. Um, and then when the weather wasn't cooperating, I mean, I can imagine them not eating so that we could eat, right? I can imagine, if they didn't pull their weight, and the discrimination that they face. So that's why I say they paid in full for me to be here. And I'm to the point where I'm unapologetic with where I'm at, or what I do, or how I speak, because they paid. I mean, my dad ultimately paid the ultimate price, with all kinds of health issues, passed away young. And him and my mother, like, I mean, they did it, right? And you earlier, you talked about ICE and immigration. I have a sister that's in Border Patrol, and I always tell people, and my sister has been there for like 18 years. I'd rather have somebody like Myra in a position like that knows what it's like, than some random person that doesn't know. In positions that I've held, often we get criticized. It's like this bucket mentality, like crab mentality. We pull each other down. Like, it's but this idea that we have to continue to lift each other, because you don't know somebody's heart, right? Until you're there and you know what they've been through. And so I'm the kind of person that doesn't like to judge a book by its cover, just because they're in that position, or they're there, or they're multimillionaires. I don't know their story until I sit down with them and hear it, right? And so we need to do more of that. And that's what's exciting about what you're doing, is that you're building a platform for immigrants like myself to tell you, right? And to tell other people that, we all do different jobs, we all do different things, but we're all fighting for the same cause.
I love that. And I will say that on my journey, the most supportive people have been Latino. I feel like that they've been the most supportive. And so you told us about like your upbringing. How did you get to college?
Yeah, so this guy, Rudy Hernandez, who's still my mentor, right? He's like a big brother to me. Um, yeah, I still talk to him, right? I text him every week. That's how appreciative I am to this man. And I feel like I'm paying a debt that I still owe him. And my way of paying, because he's so humble and he's like, nah, you did it. I know I did it, but you brought me here. You put your job on the line. You had a family to feed, and you took a chance on a 16-year-old who everybody looked at like I wasn't gonna make it. And you took that chance. Nobody else did. You did. And that's how kind of I ended up. And really it was because of my sister Myra, because she's the one that got admitted. And my parents were like, hey, you got to go take care of your sister. And I laugh about this because I was more of a liability to her. I wasn't, she was taking care of me. But in our culture, right, there's an assumption that you don't want your daughter to get pregnant, going to college, and all these assumptions and traumas. And that wasn't the case. So that's why I ended up in college. It wasn't because of a choice or anything. I was ordered by my dad and mom to go take care of Myra. And then that changed my life because it changed everything. I mean, once they open the door for one of us, man, and you these are the things that nobody talks about. Our community is so loyal. Like, somebody gives us an opportunity, we will not fail. I don't care what we have to do. We will not fail. And that's how I always felt about Rudy.
I love that, because you are a fighter. I love that. And when I was reading your book, like, I just still don't understand how you even had time to go to school. Like, it seemed like you were working a lot. You were away for months out of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And like, how did you go to school with still working?
Yeah.
The work that you did too.
Yeah, it's so crazy because people always they're always like, man, how is that possible, right? Like, is this real, right? And it's funny because I was at a quinceañera, and my wife met one of my cousins that I used to work pick toronjas and naranjas with. And my cousin Junior started talking, right? And my wife's like, man, that sounds exactly. I said, I'm not making this up, man. Like, this is like, I mean, shoot, you've been to the camps, right? But it's still, even the people close to you are like, how the hell is that possible? Is that even possible? But I paid the price too. I couldn't read or write, Veronica. Like, I just couldn't, man. Like, and that's why I credit God, because how I graduated in 3 years, I have no clue. I have no clue. I outsmarted the system, right? And they didn't care about us. So it was easy to outsmart them. I was always in the back of the room. I couldn't spell. I couldn't read. It wasn't a good fit for me, but you just worked. I don't know. You left school early and you started late. And then when you got out of work, there's an opportunity. You go to the apples or after school, and then the whole weekends. And I did that through college too, to help my family, right? So the weekends I'd go to West Michigan and go pick apples and go pick asparagus, whatever. So it's part of me. It's part of who I am. I'm a farmer. Now I'm planting seeds in people's minds, though. It's not in the fields.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And I feel like there's what you said, like, they didn't care about you. They probably didn't think, oh, this person's just not going to get that far. Let's just like pass them along, pass them from grade to grade. And I feel like that to me is just so, like, I don't know, it gets me really angry, because if I'm happy that someone believed in you, because I feel like we're all human. We all have the same capabilities. Like, literally, we all have we all have these emotions. We have brains. Like, we have the intelligence. It's just, do we have the opportunity? Like, your children are just going to have a different like the importance of education because of your generational line, like now you can give that to them. And, you know, a lot of times it just really makes me angry because all we need is just one chance. And I'm glad that you were able to, you know, to finally get to a person who believed in you, because you took that and you ran with it. And so, you know, I think for anybody who's listening, like, what would you tell them if they're like, my grades are so bad, I'm like, there's no way that I can follow my dream of, you know, getting my PhD or going to law school or being a doctor or doing whatever it is that they have in their heart? Like, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I think you have to know your why, right? Like, why are you doing it? Is it for the money? Is it for this? Is it for that? It has to be something that, because you know, Veronica, like, it gets really tough. And that and for you, it's your family, right? It's being that mentor that they didn't have, that credible lawyer that didn't want to just exploit all the money from them, because we hear those stories. You wanted to be the opposite of that. Is it easy? No, right? Because you've had to figure things out, and nobody gives you like a playbook on how to be successful. So that why needs to be very center in what you do. Like for me, I didn't know then, but I know now, is I'm really doing this for my kids and my grandkids, right? Like, try to eradicate the racism that exists for them, and it's still happening. I can't do anything about it, but I can teach them. And then my hope is that I go out and do stuff like this, talk to you, and reach the audience that you have with you, to just plant a seed, right? That we can't do this alone. There's no way in hell I can do this
Right.
alone. That it requires, and that's why I'm in higher ed, right? I help a lot of students, and now I work with faculty and staff that they can replicate, right? So my thing is about efficiency. I only have this much energy. How can I use it to maximize it? So now I go and speak, right? And when I go speak, I bring my kids with me. I bring one of them each time, and they get to see and meet people in high positions, and it's normal to them, you know, just like how it was normal for me to be in the fields. And so
Right.
my advice is that you hold on to that, right? And you know, I think I shared it in the book, but when I was picking blueberries, I used to see the airplanes, and you know, I was so beat. I envisioned that, right? Like, I wanna be in one of those. I wanna go somewhere far, 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 far away from this place. Um, and it manifests, right? Like, I've been to over 20 countries. I've seen the world, and from nothing, right? Just, it doesn't cost anything to have hope or to have a dream. And that to me was like a sign of, like, you know, I look up and I see the airplanes, and I'm telling you, 100 degrees, sweating, with so beat, and it doesn't cost anything. I was just dreaming, and it became a reality. So hold on to that, whatever that is, right? Whatever that goal is, and if it's not big enough, it's not. If it doesn't scare you, it's not big enough, right? So I don't know if that's
There's a quote that I heard. It's really good. Yeah. You can always tell the size of a man's dream by what stops him from getting there. So you can tell that you have huge dreams because nothing is stopping you.
Yeah. Well, you got nothing to lose though, right? And that's the thing, when you're used to losing so much early on. Once you get to the big stage, you're like, well, if I lose, like, what do I gotta lose? Like, I wasn't even supposed to be here. I wasn't even supposed to be here. So just try, right? Just try. So for anybody, and then don't quit, right? Because it's gonna get hard. Like, Veronica, when you're going through law school, like, that's hard. If everybody could be a lawyer, they would. But how many quit? We don't talk about that. There's so many people.
Right. So. Yeah. Yeah. And the quote that you said in the book, which I think is really like a really good quote, I like underlined it. It's success isn't cheap and it's never on sale, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, no, you got to maintain, right? I tell people all the time, it's easy to get somewhere, right? It's easy to get to the top, but how do you maintain, right? Because people can get lucky, right? We talk about luck, and they might skip 20 years, but then the experience will show, the cracks will
Right.
show. And so
Right. Yeah.
it's not cheap. It's like rent, right? You have to maintain it. It's like a plant, a seed. You can't just put it out there and it's gonna grow. Like you have to take care of the soil. You have to water it. You have to love it. Talk to it. Yeah.
Love that. And so, a last question for you: what does the American dream mean to you? So I guess I have two questions. I'll ask that one first, and then I'll ask.
Yeah,
Follow-up.
the American dream is a very interesting question because depending on who you ask, right? For my parents, it was bringing us here, right? And for them, probably the way they saw it is like, if they can be migrant workers their entire life, I'm happy. Um, but it was based on the limitation that they had, right? Of what that was. Obviously, they wanted a better life, a better opportunities, and so that's why they did it. Um, but I'm sure never in their wildest dreams that they think that we could shock the world, right? And so for me, the American dream is just it's. I mean, we're in the best country in the world, right? Things can happen. Not that it's gonna be easy, but to me, it's just those opportunities, and I think it's part of my obligation to give opportunities to others. And and yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on what you want to accomplish, and I guess that's the dream. But peace, um, generational wealth, having the opportunity to do that is important.